creating those really high-quality visuals, the kind you see in blockbuster movies, complex animations, or even that cutting-edge AI art. It takes an absolutely staggering amount of computing power.
Yeah, it really does. We're talking serious processing time, hours, sometimes days, just for a few seconds of perfect fidelity.
And getting access to that kind of power, well, traditionally that means relying on huge centralized render farms.
Exactly. And the sources we looked at point out that this can be incredibly expensive. Plus, it often creates bottlenecks, right? Especially for creators on tight deadlines.
It really makes you wonder, is there a better way, a way to tap into all that unused computing power sitting around in machines all over the world?
Well, that's precisely the challenge the render network is trying to tackle. They're going for a decentralized approach.
So that's what this deep dive is all about. We're going to unpack the render network based purely on this stack of sources you shared.
Yeah. We'll dig into its core tech, how it actually works, look at the render token, its tokenomics, and kind of figure out where it fits in this whole fast-moving digital world.
Okay. And we've got a good mix of sources here. Articles breaking down the technology, that big platform migration they did, detailed analyses of the token, real-world uses.
And even some market outlooks and predictions reported in a couple places.
Yeah. So our mission is clear. Pull out the key insights from all this material. Understand what makes Render Network tick, what's unique about it, the journey it's been on.
Its potential, the opportunities, but also the challenges it's facing. And critically, we're sticking strictly to what these sources tell us. No outside speculation.
Got it. So let's start at the foundation. How does Render actually work? The sources describe it as essentially a decentralized GPU rendering platform.
Right. Think of it like a global marketplace. It connects people who desperately need rendering power, the creators, with folks who have extra GPU capacity just sitting idle, the node operators.
Okay, so it's matching supply and demand for GPU power.
Exactly. And the fundamental goal, according to the material, is really to democratize rendering, make it more accessible.
How so?
Well, by pooling all these decentralized resources, the idea is to make high-performance rendering, more efficient and definitely more affordable compared to relying on those big centralized cloud services from the tech giants.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does a job actually flow through this system? Walk us through it based on the sources.
Sure. So first, a creator submits their job. They upload their 3D models, animations, scene files, maybe straight from Blender or Octane Render or Cinema 4D.
Right, their usual tools.
Yeah, and they include all the settings, resolution, frame rate, output format, all that stuff. Basically, telling the network exactly what they need rendered.
And then what happens?
That job then hits what the sources call the decentralized GPU marketplace. This is where the network kind of comes alive.
Okay.
Node operators, people running special software, they receive these job requests. They use their available GPU power. Maybe you're just sitting idle otherwise to process the tasks locally.
On their own machines.
On their own machines. And once it's done, they send the completed work back to the network. It's a pretty clever way to turn unused hardware into a rentable resource.
And there must be some system managing all this, matching jobs to nodes?
Oh yeah. The material talks about a smart job matching and distribution system. It figures out the best nodes for each job based on things like GPU type, bandwidth.
Makes sense.
And here's a cool detail they mention. It can break down really big jobs into smaller pieces. They call it chunked rendering.
So multiple machines can work on it at once.
Exactly. Parallel processing. So lots of nodes can tackle different parts simultaneously, which massively speeds things up. Then the system just recombines the final output automatically.
That sounds efficient, but how do you ensure the work is actually done correctly and that it's high quality?
That's where this thing called the proof of render protocol comes in. The sources really highlight this as innovative.
Proof of render. Okay, what does it do?
It's basically a verification layer. Its job is to make sure the final output actually matches what the creator asked for, that the quality is right, and that the node operator really did the work correctly.
So it builds trust without needing a central authority.
Precisely. It's designed as a trustless way to prevent errors or, people trying to cheat the system.
What about security, uploading valuable project files and stuff?
The sources say security is built in at multiple levels. They mention things like end-to-end encryption for the files.
Good.
Watermarking each rendered chunk, temporary data storage so files get deleted after the job's done, and protocols specifically aimed at protecting the creator's intellectual property.
That sounds comprehensive. And for the creators, how easy is it to actually use this? Does it plug into their existing workflows?
Yeah, the sources emphasize seamless integration. It's designed to work directly with popular tools like Octane Render, Cinema 4D, Blender. Plus, they offer custom APIs.
So less disruption for the artists and designers.
Right. The goal is to fit into how they already work.
Now, the sources also mentioned render looking beyond just like standard rendering tasks.
Yeah, they paint a picture of it being scalable infrastructure for more advanced stuff, supporting real-time rendering for virtual environments, streaming output for VR, AR, XR devices.
Okay, so immersive tech.
Exactly. And even handling AI workloads, things like training AI models or generating visuals using AI. The ambition described is pretty big to be a sort of foundational compute layer for this convergence of AI and Web3.
Wow, okay. That's a big vision. Now, speaking of big moves, the sources heavily document a major shift for the network, right? A platform transition.
Oh yeah, a huge one. Confirmed and executed in late 2023.
That was the move from Ethereum to Solana.
Correct. The sources laid out clearly. The original RNDR token, which was an ERC20 on Ethereum, got completely replaced by a new SPL token called Render on Solana.
And how did users manage that switch? Was it a straight swap?
It was a one-to-one swap for token holders. And to help people move their tokens, the Render Foundation launched an upgrade assistant tool. It used the wormhole bridge technology, and they even incentivized early movers. The sources mentioned 1.14 million RNDR tokens were set aside to help cover Ethereum gas fees for people who migrated quickly.
Always nice to cover those gas fees. But the big question is why? Why make such a fundamental shift away from Ethereum?
The sources are pretty specific on the reasons. It really boils down to performance and scalability.
Solana's known for being fast, right?
Extremely fast. They cite Solana's ability to handle like up to 65,000 transactions per second. That kind of speed is crucial for coordinating rendering tasks quickly across a big decentralized network.
And fees. Ethereum fees can be killer.
Exactly. Solana's transaction costs are drastically lower. The sources point out this makes things like microtransactions, paying for small rendering jobs, or even parts of jobs much more practical and economically viable.
Okay, so speed and cost. What about handling growth?
That's the other key piece. The sources state that Solana's underlying infrastructure is just better suited for the kind of scaling Render anticipates needing, especially with growing demand from both rendering and those more intensive AI workloads we talked about.
So it aligns better with their long-term vision for a really efficient, massive network?
That's the argument presented.
Yeah.
Better alignment for efficiency and scale.
So post-migration, what's the status? The Solana Render token is the main one now?
It's the only active one for the network, according to the sources. All transactions, all services, paying node operators, it all uses the Render token on Solana.
What about the old Ethereum RNDR tokens?
They technically still exist on Ethereum, but they're inactive within the Render ecosystem. Holders absolutely have to migrate them, using that upgrade tool to participate or use their value on the network, and future governance, voting, all that stuff. That's also exclusively using the Solana-based render.
Got it. And what about the technical side, moving the core infrastructure? How did that change things?
It was substantial. The whole smart contract architecture that manages job queuing, matching nodes, handling payments securely, tracking everything that now uses what Solana calls programs.
Solana programs, right, their version of smart contracts.
Exactly. And these programs, the sources note, allow for much more efficient job handling, secure matching. Solana's low latency and its single shard architecture apparently make processing jobs faster with fewer bottlenecks compared to how things worked on Ethereum layers.
Which helps with those real-time applications you mentioned.
Absolutely. That improved speed and coordination is vital for real-time streaming and those demanding AI rendering tasks.
Okay, let's zoom in on the render token itself. Its purpose and the tokenomics, as laid out in the sources. Its main job is utility, right?
Primarily utility, yes. It's the native token you use to pay for rendering jobs on the network. Simple as that.
And it's also how the node operators get paid.
Correct. It's the incentive for them to provide their GPU power. The sources also mention upcoming features like staking.
Staking, how would that work?
The idea described is that node operators could stake render to boost their reputation on the network and potentially get priority access to jobs.
Interesting. And those microtransactions you mentioned earlier, Solana's low fees make that feasible with the token.
Yeah, that's a key benefit highlighted. Paying for tiny bits of work becomes practical.
Okay, what about the supply? What do the sources say about how many tokens are out there?
The numbers vary slightly depending on the source's date, but they generally report a circulating supply around, say, 517.89 million render. The maximum possible supply is stated as roughly 644.245 million.
So a good chunk is already circulating.
Yeah, the math works out to about 80.39% of the total potential supply being out there right now.
And market cap, I imagine that fluctuates.
Big time. The sources we saw cited figures anywhere from around $1.81 billion USD in one analysis to about $3.17 billion USD in another, just depending on when they pulled the data. Really shows the volatility.
No kidding. How were the tokens initially allocated? Did the sources break that down?
They do give a breakdown. Some key buckets mentioned are things like escrow for partners, a treasury for OTOY, the company behind Render, allocations for public and private sales, an amount set aside for inflation, and an RNDR reserve.
Any details on unlocking?
One interesting point noted is that the entire public and private sale allocation was 100% unlocked right from the start at launch. Overall, the sources suggest around 49% of the total token supply has been unlocked so far.
Okay, and what about inflation? Is the supply increasing over time?
Yes, the sources describe an inflation mechanism. New tokens are released into the supply in small batches.
How small? Is there a limit?
The material states it's capped never more than 10% increase per year. And the stated purpose, according to the sources, is interesting. It's meant to gently dilute existing holders.
Dilute them? Why?
In favor of distributing tokens to new participants joining the network. Kind of like an incentive to grow the user and operator base.
Huh. Is there a schedule for this?
Yeah, it's structured. There were launch years 1 through 5, and now it's in a growth phase from year 5 onwards indefinitely. For this growth stage, they mention a proposed damping coefficient.
Damping coefficient? Sounds technical.
It does. It's 0.945. Think of it like a dimmer switch. The sources say it's designed to gradually slow down the rate at which new tokens are released over time during this growth phase.
Okay, slowing down the inflation gradually. Got it. Now let's talk impact, real-world use cases. This is where it gets tangible, right?
Absolutely. We know rendering is crucial for visuals, but the sources give some really cool specific examples of where a render network is actually being used.
Like what?
Well, in media and entertainment, obviously. The demand for top-tier graphics and films, games, visual media, it's just constantly rising. Render provides that scalable GPU power needed for, huge cinematic scenes, amazing visuals.
The stuff audiences really notice now.
Exactly. And they specifically mentioned artist Raoul Marx. Apparently, he used Render Network for the opening title sequence of Westworld Season 4.
Oh, wow. Okay. That sequence was impressive.
Right. They also connect the network to light stage technology. That's used for creating those super realistic digital doubles you see in big movies like Star Wars and Marvel films.
And OTOY, the company behind Render, their software Octane Render has been used in big films too.
Yeah, the sources note Octane Render was used for opening sequences in Captain Marvel and Ant-Man and the Wasp. They also mentioned Disney has had involvement with OTOY going back to 2016.
Any other notable mentions?
There's even a rumor mentioned in the sources about The Last of Us title sequence, possibly using Render. These examples really hammer home its relevance in high-end production.
Definitely. But it's not just Hollywood, right? The sources talked about AI and XR too.
Correct. They officially added support for AI and machine learning tasks back in July 2023. So node operators can now use their GPUs for jobs involving AI-generated graphics or even building AI prototypes.
Who would use that?
Think product designers, architects, people who need complex visualizations or want to rapidly prototype ideas, test out different textures and colors in a really immersive way.
So it speeds up their design process.
Massively. It reinforces that idea of Render being this flexible compute layer, powering not just Web3 stuff, but also the heavy demands of AI and XR, especially where real-time rendering and streaming to VR or AR devices are needed.
Okay, so it's ambitious, it's got cool tech, real use cases. But who are they up against? What's the competition like?
The sources definitely acknowledge it's a dynamic space. Decentralized rendering on the blockchain is competitive.
Who else is mentioned?
They name a few key competitors, like Golem Network, Srender, and Consensus. And they note these platforms offer, broadly similar services aimed at decentralized rendering.
But Render must have some advantages, according to the sources. What makes them stand out?
They list several. First, obviously, is the core decentralized approach itself, using that global GPU network for scalability, security, efficiency.
We covered that. What else?
Cost effectiveness is a big one. By using distributed, often idle power, they argue it offers much more competitive pricing compared to paying for traditional centralized render farms.
Cheaper is always good.
And faster rendering speeds. Because the network is distributed, jobs can often get done significantly quicker, which is huge for industries like film and gaming, where deadlines are everything.
Makes sense. Quality.
High-quality output is another advantage cited, largely thanks to that tight integration with Octane Render, which is known for its photorealistic results.
And the blockchain aspect.
That provides secure and transparent transactions. It creates a trustless workflow, ensures data integrity, holds everyone accountable. That's a key advantage listed.
And you mentioned the community earlier.
Yeah, the structure itself fosters collaboration, people sharing resources.
Yeah.
GPU owners connect with creators. That helps the whole ecosystem grow.
Are there other factors mentioned giving them an edge?
The sources also point to things like their deep focus, specifically on rendering tech, strategic partnerships, especially with OTOI, targeting that high-quality niche within the market, strong community engagement, and that focus on scalability we discussed.
Okay, so looking at the bigger picture, how does render fit into current industry trends?
It seems pretty well aligned based on the sources. There's that undeniable surge in demand for high-quality visual content, right? Driven a lot by VR and AR growth.
Definitely.
Then there's the broader shift towards decentralized blockchain solutions generally. People value the security, transparency, and resilience they can offer.
True. Anything else?
And interestingly, sustainability. The sources touch on this. Because Render's model uses existing, often idle GPUs, it potentially minimizes the need to power up new, dedicated hardware.
So potentially more energy efficient than running massive dedicated server farms 24/7.
That's the implication, yeah. A potentially greener approach compared to some traditional methods.
But it can't all be smooth sailing. What potential challenges do the sources identify?
There are definitely risks outlined. Regulatory uncertainty is a big one. Always a factor in crypto and blockchain. Evolving government rules could impact them.
Standard crypto risk.
Yep. Competition too. It's described as a crowded space, so they need to keep innovating constantly just to stay ahead.
Makes sense. What about scaling?
Scalability remains a challenge. Can the platform really handle massive growth in demand without hitting performance issues or becoming less efficient? That's a key question they need to address continually.
And security, always a concern.
Absolutely. Protecting user funds, protecting project data from hacks or fraud, that's a major ongoing concern in the crypto world that requires constant vigilance.
Anything else? Technology changes fast.
That's the last big one mentioned. Keeping pace with technological advancements, both in blockchain tech and in the GPU industry itself. They need to stay on the cutting edge.
Okay, challenges noted. But what about the opportunities? Where do the sources see the upside?
Lots of potential highlighted. Meeting that rising demand across film, gaming, architecture, you name it, by offering a solution that's potentially more efficient and cost-effective is huge.
The core value proposition.
Exactly. Then there's attracting clients who really prioritize data protection and transparency. Leveraging those blockchain features is a clear opportunity.
Building trust.
Right. And fostering that global creative ecosystem, connecting users, enabling collaboration that opens doors for innovation.
Expanding their reach.
Definitely. Market expansion into diverse sectors is a big opportunity. Entertainment, advertising, industrial design, VRR, the list goes on. And finally, just riding the wave, capitalizing on the growth of blockchain and GPU rendering technology itself.
Okay, so let's get to the market snapshot and those price predictions mentioned in the sources. And we need to be super clear here. This is just reporting what the sources said, right?
Yeah.
Highly speculative, not financial advice.
Absolutely crystal clear on that. This is purely reflecting the data and predictions found in the provided materials.
Okay, so current price reported in the sources. It seems to vary.
Yeah, one source had it around $3.49. Another showed approximately $8.21, obviously depending on the exact time the data was captured.
And recent price movements also differed.
They did. One noted like a plus 2.6% change over 24 hours. Another source showed plus 9% over 7 days and about plus 19% over 30 days. Just different snapshots in time.
Circulating supply seems consistent, though.
Around 517.89 million render, yeah. And the market cap figures mentioned just correspond to those different price points, $1.81 billion USD or $3.17 billion USD, depending on the source and date.
Any technical analysis mentioned? charts and stuff.
One source did mention some technical analysis. It suggested a potentially bearish trend based on moving averages on certain charts, like the 4-hour and 1 day at that specific time. Though it also noted the RSI, the Relative Strength Index, was neutral.
Okay, standard technical indicators. Now the predictions. These are explicitly labeled as coming from user input or crypto experts' analysis within the sources, right?
Correct. Very important distinction. So one source, drawing from Binance user input apparently, gave predictions like $3.49 for the next day, $3.50 in 30 days. Then looking further out, $4.46 by 2030, and maybe $11.83 by 2050.
Okay, relatively modest long-term growth in that view. But the other source?
Dramatically different. This one attributed its predictions to changelly crypto experts. For June 2025, they predicted an average price of $8.60. July 2025, average $8.70.
Still in single digits for 2025.
Right, but then for 2026, the average prediction jumped to $12.89. For 2030, a huge leap to an average of $54.73.
Whoa! $54 by 2030? That's optimistic compared to the other source.
Extremely. And it gets wilder. Looking way out to 2040, the predictions from this source were in the thousands. Like $4,130 to $4,960 minimum maximum in one view, or $4,149 to $5,126 in another analysis cited.
Thousands of dollars per token, seriously.
That's what the source reported as the expert prediction. And for 2050, it was even higher. Ranges like $5,942 to $6,768, or $6,136 to $7,019, depending on the specific analysis view presented in that source.
Okay. The difference between like $11 and potentially $7,000 by 2050 is astronomical. It really highlights how incredibly speculative these long-range crypto forecasts are.
Absolutely. It's a massive gulf, and underscores the volatility and inherent uncertainty. The sources themselves generally remind us what affects the price, too.
Right. The usual suspects.
Yeah. Basic supply and demand, naturally. Big network updates or changes to the rules. Adjustments to token rewards for node operators. And of course, wider real-world events, new regulations, big companies adopting the tech, security incidents like hacks. All that stuff can move the price.
And the universal disclaimer. Digital asset prices are super volatile.
Always. High risk, high volatility.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the picture we get from these sources is a network with a really compelling core idea, right? Democratizing high-performance rendering, using blockchain, and a decentralized network.
Definitely. And that big move to Solana seems like a key strategic play, aimed squarely at boosting efficiency and scalability to handle future growth and those more demanding tasks like AI and real-time rendering.
And its potential uses cover some really vital growing areas: media, AI, XR. We saw specific examples cited showing it's not just theoretical, it's being used in demanding industries.
Yeah, real-world traction. But like any project pushing boundaries, it's sitting at this interesting crossroads, isn't it? Huge opportunities ahead, but also significant challenges, competition, scaling, regulation that they need to navigate carefully.
So considering Render's big ambition, positioning itself as maybe a foundational compute layer for this next wave of digital creativity, the whole AI plus Web3 era, and then you look at that absolutely massive range in the long-term price predictions reported in the sources.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. What could this potential transformation actually mean for the future of creating digital content? For who gets access to high-performance computing?
And zooming in a bit, what possibilities could a widely adopted, truly decentralized rendering network open up for you? Whether you're a creator trying to push the limits, an innovator building the next big thing in VR or AI, or just someone who appreciates the incredible visuals that shape our digital world.